Hey, everybody, and welcome to the UFC 246 Aftermath. And Conor McGregor taking care of business quickly. TKO, I think the official time was 40 seconds on it. And, man, doing it against, don't get me wrong, I think Conor had an advantage on the feet going into this fight. But Cowboy is a world-class MMA fighter. Very good Muay Thai, good in the clinch. And you saw, so the fight starts off, right? Conor comes in, he throws a big left hand and misses with it, and Cowboy ducks under it. And I thought Cowboy was actually going to run a double leg there. And I don't know if he just didn't commit to it or didn't feel like it was there. But they wind up in the clinch, and Conor kind of drops his base down a little bit and starts landing these shoulders. And you've seen people kind of use and implement that technique before. I can remember, I think John Jones did it against Anthony Smith, right? But I've never seen it done so effectively. And just the amount of leverage and the amount of pop that he was getting on him. And you could tell that they were significant in the moment. And then when they broke apart, you could see that Cerrone's face was, lit up, puffed up, right? I think it looked like he had broken his nose already. And Conor moves forward. I think Cowboy threw a head kick, if I'm remembering correctly, but Conor blocked it. Conor returns fire with a head kick of his own and then just swarms Cowboy and gets the finish. So it didn't take long at all. And the fact that this fight took place at 170 pounds opens up a lot of doors for Conor, right? Okay, so you got people are talking like Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal, right? And I don't think Conor's going to end up fighting Kamaru Usman. I think that if anybody at that weight class deserves the title shot, it's going to be Jorge Masvidal, right? So I don't think that Conor's going to be able to leapfrog Jorge in order to fight Usman, but I do think that a fight with Jorge Masvidal is possible. But I'll tell you what makes me nervous about Conor fighting some of those elite guys at 170 is that Cowboy is a legitimate – I think that when you look at Cowboy, his ideal weight class is 155, and you saw tonight that Cowboy is bigger than Conor, right? Conor looked good. Conor looked healthy, don't get me wrong, but I still think that 155 suits Conor a little bit better. I think there's something to cutting a healthy amount of weight where you're carrying a little bit less around on fight night, and I think maybe there's some advantages cardio-wise. Maybe – I don't know. There's give and take to it, right? But – I think that a lot of the guys who are settled into that 170-pound weight class are going to be significantly bigger than Conor, Jorge, and especially Kamaru Usman, right? Not that he can't go in there. Conor's striking is spectacular, man, and he looked great tonight. But I think that what's going to happen is I think Conor wants that Khabib rematch. I think Conor's a pretty prideful guy, and I think that he's going to want to. I think he's going to want the winner of Tony Ferguson and Khabib, right? And that fight's only a few months away. Conor could also have a quick turnaround, though. If he does want the Jorge Masvidal fight, I don't think a single shot was landed on Conor McGregor tonight. Like I said, I think Cowboy threw a head kick, but I don't even think it connected. I think all the damage was done by Conor. So he went in there, got a quick win, got out. He's healthy, and he's ready to move on to the next, whatever the next event's going to be, right? But I think he's going to want to get that one against Khabib back. So I don't know, man. There's so many options for him. It could go so many different ways. But I think that what's going to happen is that Usman is probably going to end up fighting Jorge Masvidal for the welterweight title, especially now that Tyron Woodley and Leon Edwards have been booked. Those are your two other top contenders in that weight class, I think, and they're kind of out of the picture now because they're fighting each other March 21st in England. But I don't know, man. Jorge and Conor could happen. That fight would sell massive pay-per-views, especially with the highlight reel you could put together to push the promo. Both guys have sellable personalities. Both guys like to fight. They like to stand. That fight just makes me nervous a little bit for Conor because Jorge's a big dude, and he's a great pressure boxer, and he has great wrestling, great jiu-jitsu. Not that Conor doesn't, man. But, don't get me wrong, I'd watch it 100%, but I still think that the ideal weight class for Conor is 155 pounds. So, also in the meantime, right, if you just another good fight to book would be Justin Gaethje and Conor McGregor. That's a fight that arguably should have happened instead of Cowboy Conor. I think a guy who is a little bit more deserving of that fight. But then again, Conor's coming off a loss, long layoff. The Cowboy fight, it's not like the Cowboy fight didn't make sense, but I think a lot of UFC fans were clamoring for that Justin Gaethje fight. So, after Khabib and Tony fight, that's probably going to be a hard fight on both guys no matter who wins, I would imagine, right? They're probably going to need a significant amount of time off. So they're probably not going to be able to go again until you're talking about like maybe fall, late summer, like September, October-ish, I would imagine, after a fight like that. So it depends on how active Conor wants to be. I would say in the meantime, the thing for Conor to do would be to return to lightweight and fight Justin Gaethje. And then the winner of that gets a title shot against the winner of Khabib and Tony, right? Because, I mean, goddamn, with how fast Conor just finished this, you could throw Conor and, well, the problem is going to be that, like, I don't think Conor's ever going to fight in a co-main spot, especially on the same card as Khabib and Tony. So they won't fight on the same card, but they could fight in the same time frame, man. I mean, Conor's healthy. He's ready to go. He didn't take any damage. So a lot of different avenues he could take. And as far as Cowboy, I still like Cowboy better at 155, man. I think Cowboy is maybe, you can't say more well-suited for 170 than Conor because Conor just beat him at 170, right? But I still think that like the ideal weight class for both of these guys is 155. Anyway, I don't know who Cowboy is going to end up fighting next. It's a tough one, man. He's lost. Is he on a 3-fight skid right now? Ferguson, Gaethje, Conor? And all TKOs, and I mean, Gaethje was a knockout, right? So it's hard to tell, man. And just, I mean, way too early prediction. Should Conor and Justin fight? I like Conor in that fight, man. I think his striking is so clean. I just think that, like, Conor, people forget, man, just because he got mauled by Khabib, that happens to everybody. That happens to everybody that fights him, man. Conor is still very elite. His striking is still leagues above most of the people in that division, and I think people kind of forget that because he hasn't been around for a while, but you saw that he's obviously been training. He's obviously been working on some new things, and he looked brilliant, man. I mean, say what you want about maybe Cowboy wasn't the right fight. Maybe it should have been Gaethje, but it doesn't change the fact that Conor looked brilliant, and he got the job done quickly. I'm looking for him to be hunting the 155-pound belt. I just think there's a lot going on at 170, and I think there's some beef stirring between Jorge and Usman, and I know Jorge wants that fight, but it's going to It's going to depend on Conor, man, and what he wants. The UFC kind of revolves around him and decision-making shit, right? All right, anyway, let's work our way down the card now that we've finished talking about that. As far as Cowboy, I don't know who he's going to fight next, man. He could be in one of those situations where he gets thrown to like a dangerous up-and-comer like he kind of did against Alexander Hernandez, right? Or like he kind of did against Mike Perry. It just depends. And he's the kind of guy who, like, whatever fight they offer him, he's going to say yes to. So positive on this is that he's probably going to get a pretty significant payday for only having to fight for 30 seconds. But, I mean, at the same time, like, it's easy to say that, but he's a fighter, man. He's already got money. He wanted to go in there and win the fight, so you got to feel for him. I felt really bad for Cowboy after that because you know he probably like put everything he had into training, and for the fight to end that quickly, man, it's got to be devastating for him and his team. And I'm a big Cowboy fan, so I mean that's rough. And I hoping for a quick recovery for him, and hopefully get a quick turnaround and get back in the saddle. Maybe some time off would be good too. I mean, just kind of sit down, reevaluate things, like, but I'm hoping that in his next venture to the octagon, he's successful and can get a win, get back on track. Anyway, let's move down now to the co-main event of the evening between Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington. And not the most exciting fight in the world, right? But if you're Holly Holm, it's a fight that you fought the fight you had to fight to win. And a lot of clinch work from Holly, and what you did get to see is how overwhelmingly powerful Holly Holm is, right? Like, Raquel Pennington's a pretty strong girl and, like, tough as nails, but just in terms of raw power, Holly was able to just out-muscle her in the clinch and land shots. And like I said, not the most exciting fight in the world, but also, I mean, and in my prediction for this, I was kind of hoping that both of these girls would open up, and it just wasn't the case. Not that Holly didn't fight a smart fight, not that she didn't fight a fight. She fought a fight that won for her, but it wasn't a fan-friendly fight. And it's like, man, in the build-up to Conor and Cowboy, you're kind of hoping for a little bit of fireworks, right? But I mean, whatever. That's fighting. You can't get too bent out of shape about shit like that. But I don't know, man. It's tough. It's tough to kind of think about who Holly's gonna fight next because she's already fought like the who's who in that division, right? And maybe a rematch with Jermaine Durandamy could be coming down the pipe. Jermaine coming off the loss to Amanda Nunes, and a lot of people feel like Holly Holm won that fight against Jermaine. So that there's some potential there. I don't know, man. It's tough to play matchmaker, but it wasn't like the most. It wasn't. I mean, it was a solid victory. She definitely won the fight. I thought she won all 3 rounds, but it wasn't like overwhelming. You know what I mean? It wasn't enough to be like, oh my god, she looks like a world beater. Time for a rematch with Amanda or anything like that. You know, so. And from Raquel, I gotta be honest, man. I just didn't understand the game plan. Like, okay, it had been proven to you through 2 rounds that you were losing all of the clinch engagements, right? And she was and like, I didn't like her corner advice. Her corners were just like, all right, just go forward, like close the distance. I'm like, yeah, but Holly's a great counter striker, man. And you're just telling her, like, you got to give her setups and give her ways to close the distance. Like, I'm not a big fan of vague corner advice, especially when you can tell that your fighter is struggling to find avenues to win. Like, you can't just tell her to move forward. Like, you could tell anybody that. You have to give her details and like little things that she can do in order to close the distance. I'm not saying I know what those would be, but like when you're listening to corner advice, I like it to be technical and I like it to be specific, man. Otherwise, you're running her into danger potentially. But and then in the 3rd round, like I was like, all right, Raquel Pennington is like clearly down 2 rounds. She's really gonna have to open things up here and start throwing her hands around if she wants to get a win. And she's gonna have to get it. And she's not like notorious for knockouts, right? So you're like, maybe she has to take her down. But I don't know, man. Okay, so it had been proven, like I said, over 2 rounds that Holly had a clear advantage in the clinch, and it seemed like Raquel was willing to engage in the clinch. I don't know if she had a hope that she was going to be able to drag the fight to the ground, but I would have liked, if you're going to try to get it there, I would have just liked to see clean shots for the legs on, like, try to get a good double leg or a good single leg and try to, you know what I mean, run the pipe on a single or something and get it to the ground. Because the clinch work clearly wasn't working. You were getting reversed and just out-muscled there. So I would have liked to see, like, boxing to set up a knife shot, you know what I mean? And maybe mixing some, also Holly holding her hands high. You got to go to the body to get her to drop those hands, or the things that you're throwing at her face just aren't going to be a threat. So I don't know, man. I just didn't like the game plan for Raquel Pennington. I don't know if it had to do with cornering. I don't know if it was something she felt like maybe if she got in the clinch, like I said, she'd be able to get the fight to the ground. But to me, it just didn't make sense. Like, you were already losing the fight. You got to go for broke a little bit, and going into the clinch in a position that you lost in that position for 2 rounds straight. Like, why go back to it if you want to win the fight, you know? But I'm not in there. I don't know. I know it's much easier said than done, and observing it from like my point of view, and it's easier to get frustrated with it, right? But whatever. I mean, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't the most exciting fight in the world, but it was a good win for Holly Holm and a good one for her to get back on track and kind of, you know, maybe get that confidence back that she needs to start moving forward if she wants to challenge for a title again. And then, okay, so before that, Maurice Green and Alexia Oleinik go out, duke it out, and they have a pretty entertaining fight, right? Like, you see Maurice Green landing some nice shots on the feet, lands a nice kick that kind of knocks Alexia Oleinik down, but Oleinik, man, just able to put that pressure on. And he does, like I said this in the breakdown, man, he might not throw the most technical shots in the world, but he's going to throw bombs and he's going to cover distance and he's going to find a way to get you up against the cage and engage you in that clinch. And Maurice Green did an excellent job of surviving. He was in some real trouble there. He was threatening with triangles in the first round. But here's the thing. When 2 guys get tired, right, the superior when both of you are tired and you're both like in a grappling situation, the guy with more grappling experience is almost always going to come through. It's not really like striking where like you could wing a big shot and maybe connect and it knocks the guy out. Like, grappling is much harder. There's so many more like technicalities and little things that you have to overcome that normally the more experienced guy, when you're both exhausted, is going to come out on top. And you could just see that Alexia Oleinik was the more seasoned grappler, man. He's a veteran and he's just got more time on the ground than Maurice Green does. So when you get into those situations, it's like, yeah, Maurice Green can survive for a little bit, but don't forget, Alexi might be burning his arms out and might be tiring himself out, but he's felt that how many times in training do you think? Like, how many times do you think he's felt his arms get burnt out? And just like, experience matters a ton, and especially in grappling, it's just so much harder to overcome. Now, if they had stood and separated, like, anything could happen, right? Guys could still wing big shots and somebody could land and connect. And like, a good example is like, okay, Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic, right? Like, when they fought, Francis Ngannou may have been tired and he may have been worn down, but you could still see that he carried dangerous knockout power in his hands late into the rounds, right? But when you go to the ground, a lot of that gets nullified. And I think the same thing kind of happened to Maurice Green. Not that Maurice Green wasn't defending well, and not that he wasn't, not that he wasn't threatening with his own things, it's just going to be hard to overcome that. Like, I would say like 90, like it's a pretty solid bet. Like I don't want to put a percentage on it, right? But a lot of the fucking time, the guy who's better, it's just so much harder to overcome. Like, you might be, and when your energy burns out, like I don't know. I'm repeating myself a lot here. Sorry guys, I'm fucking tired as hell. But point is, superior grappler wins when you get into grappling situations and both guys are tired, right? So good win for Alexei Oleinik. Maurice Green too, man, just fallen into a little bit of a rough skid, but I think he'll be back. He looks in way better shape than when he started his UFC career. I still like his footwork. I still like his punches and his movement and his length of the strikes and everything. It's just he's got to find a way to make it all come together, All right, and before that, we had Brian Kelleher fighting Ode Osborne. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Ode Osborne. And picked up a night. Ode Osborne looked good on the feet, and you could tell immediately that Brian Kelleher was like, nah, we're not playing this game. Like, this is dangerous. You could see that Osborne had a significant speed advantage. And as soon as the opportunity for the single leg opened up, Kelleher grabbed it. And chose not to. He went for a double leg, ended up securing a takedown, got the fight up against the cage, and was able to get past the guard and lock in a guillotine, man. And people forget Kelleher. Might not be a big name, but he is a guy who's beaten guys like Kenan Barrow. And his most two recent losses were to John Lineker, and then I can't think of the other one off the top of my head. But both tough fights, right? And he's a veteran. He had a lot more fights than Osborne going into this, and once again, man, if the striking's not working out, the guy with more experience and more grappling experience is going to tend to win. Montel Jackson, who I actually had on the podcast. You guys should go back and check that podcast out. A little bit sketchy, the connection and everything was, But it was a good podcast, and he had some really interesting stuff to say. But again, he's beat Damian Stasiak. Lost to Marlon Chito Vera. He beat Yuri Alcantara via guillotine. Julio Arce via guillotine. Got a spinning back fist KO over Josh Robinson. This guy he's got a good resume, man. He's very legit, and for Ode Osborne, he's coming pretty fresh. I don't know if this was his UFC debut. I believe it might have been. I think he's coming off the Contender Series, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me make sure. Yeah, Contender Series, first round armbar. This guy's only, after that loss, I think he's 8-3 now? 8-2? Yeah, 8-3 now. When you get a guy who has 20, and Kelleher, out of his 19 wins, 8 of them have been submissions, right? The other 7 are knockouts. So he's a guy who's a finisher, and you put him in there against a guy who's relatively green in his career. Once again, man, the grappling is just going to shine through. And it's such a big advantage to have that in your back pocket. Like, if the striking's not going your way, taking it to the ground is just such a safe bet because it's so hard to overcome experience on the ground, right? It's just so hard to bridge that gap. Like, things are just so much more secure down there because and it's also like, especially if you can get top position, right? And just put pressure on guys. Like, it's so much harder to get out from underneath a guy if you're not as experienced as he is. Right? It's going to the ground in general. Like, if you might be able to get on top of a guy if you don't have as much experience and hold him there for a little bit, he'll probably eventually escape. But if the guy's on top of you, gonna be a rough night for you. But good win for Brian Kelleher. And this was a fight that replaced Claudia Gadelha and Alexa Grasso after Alexa Grasso missed weight, which, can't say I'm bummed because this was a good fight. It was an interesting one to see, but I was really excited for Claudia Gadelha and Alexa Grasso. I thought that was a great matchup. And Alexa Grasso missed by like 5.5 pounds, which is pretty significant. So she's either got to consider moving up a weight class or hiring a nutritionist or doing something different in her camp to make sure that she gets down to the weight. Because, it's one thing to miss weight, but to miss weight by 5.5 pounds, that's pretty significant, especially at a weight class that low, right? It's not like she missed it at 205. It's like 115. So 5 pounds, you're already halfway up to the next weight class. All right, and Diego Ferreira going out and beating Anthony Pettis. And this was a fight again, man, where like Anthony Pettis has great jiu-jitsu, but you just got to see that Diego Ferreira is really world-class jiu-jitsu. Anthony Pettis was looking good early on. I think he was winning the majority of the striking exchanges, and you could tell that Diego was trying to throw some combos back Pettis up against the cage, and kept lifting his leg up like he was anticipating that kick, like he did not want to eat that kick. But you could tell that Diego realized that he was at a disadvantage on the feet, and he was hunting to get this thing to the ground. And once he got it there, he had a clear advantage. He took Anthony Pettis' back, was hanging out there for a while. Pettis was eventually able to spin back and recover guard or get back into the closed guard of Diego Ferreira. But in the second round, Diego came out, engaged. I mean, he got him in the clinch, got him up against the cage, drug it to the ground again. And you could see that Diego made an adjustment so that Pettis couldn't spin into his guard again and was able to just ride it out, man, and get a nice submission. I don't know if it was a blood choke or more of a neck crank that he pulled off, but was able to get Anthony Pettis out of there. And Diego Ferreira, I mean, he's riding like a 6-fight win streak right now, and he just beat Anthony Pettis. And I know that Pettis is one of those guys, right, who sometimes he shows up and he looks brilliant, and other times he shows up and it's like, man, what the fuck's going on here? Like, he just looks like he's a little bit out of it. I think all that happened tonight was, again, a lot of grappling shining through, right? I mean, with Alec and Kelleher and Pettis to open up the card. But, Modafferi, right, on the prelims. Sadiq Youssef in that second round against Andre Fili. You get to see what an advantage it can be a really good grappler, especially in situations where you're outmatched on the feet. Like, it's just so much more sure. Like, if you get into a fight with, this is, I guess, kind of the point I was trying to make earlier in the show. If you get into a fight with like a guy who is a better striker than you, there's still a slight possibility that you might land that shot that knocks him out. But if he's a better grappler than you and he takes you down and he's on top of you, the odds of you submitting him are so much lower than the odds of like you knocking out someone who's better at striking than you. You know what? I don't know if that's making sense. Like I said, I'm tired as fuck right now. It's like 11:30, which is way past my bedtime. But yeah, man, you just have, if you have a grappling advantage, it's such a big thing to have. And I think you saw that really on display in the Ferreira and Anthony Pettis fight. Like, Pettis was clearly better on the feet, but Ferreira was able to close the distance, grab a hold of him, and get it to the ground where he had a clear and obvious advantage, and he capitalized on it. Probably the biggest upset of the fight was Maycee Barber and Roxanne Modafferi on the prelims, though. And I know that Maycee hurt her knee. Speaking of, what the fuck was up with that? I've been feeling lately, like now that things have gone over to ESPN especially and the UFC is getting more publicity, maybe I'm making this up. I feel like doctors want camera time. I really feel like that. Like Maycee Barber, when Maycee Barber's sitting there, it's her knee, and people limping, like people get hurt in fights, and I've never seen a doctor check out somebody's knee. But Maycee had to sit down. He is stretching her out, and then he tells the doctor that she has like a partial ACL or MCL tear. How the fuck would he know that? I really get the feeling, and I kind of thought the same thing when they stopped the fight with Nate Diaz and his cut against Jorge Masvidal. Maybe I'm off base, maybe I'm wrong, but I really do feel like a lot of these doctors are wanting some camera time, or like a little bit, like just a little, they want to be involved in it somehow, you know what I mean? And it's irritating as fuck. But Maycee Barber, tough as hell, roughed that out. And Roxanne Modafferi proving again that like if you have a grappling advantage over somebody, and Maycee Barber, very aggressive, very strong, has an impressive highlight reel for how young she is in her career, but still has some things wrong with her striking, keeps her head on the center line, hangs her chin in the air, and she gets tagged with things, man. I mean, when she tore whatever she tore on her knee, I think Roxanne hit her with a nice jab. And if they got into a striking fight, like a pure striking fight, Maycee Barber's probably going to overwhelm her just because she's more powerful, probably faster. But Roxanne just stayed, the threat of the takedown's always there, and Roxanne she stayed calm, composed, was circling, throwing the jab out there, and closed distance. I mean, she controlled the first round before Maycee got hurt. So, props to Maycee Barber for fighting through that. I mean, you got to be tough as hell to go through that. And even, comes out in the third round and gets top position, looks pretty good for a little bit. But again, like you might be able to control someone for a little bit, right? You might be able to stay on top of someone like Roxanne Modafferi for a little bit and get a little bit of control, but as time wears on, the superior grappler, especially in late rounds, is going to be able to reverse and get on top of you at some point and control you from there, and you're going to have a much harder time getting out from under her than she did getting out from under you. So I think this was a good learning experience for Maycee Barber. I expect her to come back stronger, smarter, and shout out to Roxanne Modafferi, man, because she seems like the nicest person in the world, right? And she gets some limelight getting the headlining bout on ESPN for the prelims and coming in as like a plus 550 underdog and pulling that off. That's a big deal for her, and I think she's a real veteran of the sport. She has a ton of fights to her name, and I think she deserves a little bit more respect than she's been getting. Oh, I know what I wanted to touch on. Like I said, matchmaking's tough, right? But Diego Ferreira, I'll tell you what I think a good fight would be, man. Islam Makhachev. Two guys who are surging in that division, two pretty good grapplers. You got a guy in Islam Makhachev who's pretty good on the feet as well, and Diego's looked much improved in that area. Diego just coming off a big win. I think Diego's ranked like 13 or something right now, and Islam's like 14. And I know that Pettis is 9, but you got to, like I said, Pettis is just so hit or miss sometimes, man. I don't know, but I really like a fight with Diego Ferreira and Islam Makhachev. Makhachev's a guy who I think he's ranked a little bit low, but I think his skills are much better than his ranking. And I think a fight with Diego Ferreira would do a lot for both guys to kind of prove where they're at, like prove who's going to be going up and getting that next, who's going to be inching their way closer to the title. I think a fight between those two would propel, the winner will get propelled into the top 10, which I think they're both deserving of. So I really like that fight. And Pettis, like I said, man, he didn't look bad. He was landing at shots and stuff, and I don't know what's going to come next for him. It's hard to tell. Maybe like the loser of Dan Hooker and Paul Felder would be a good fight. I think that would maybe be a little bit more favorable. Oh no, never mind. Paul Felder and fucking Anthony Pettis are teammates. They're not going to fight, right? So maybe if Dan Hooker loses the fight, he could fight Anthony Pettis. I don't know. There's a lot of options at 155. It's a Shark Tank down there. They'll find someone for him. Like I said, I'm not the matchmaker. What else did I want to touch on? Yeah, man. I mean, the prelims were good. Drew Dober picked up a first-round knockout. Askarov beating Tim Elliott. And then, Sadiq Youssef picking up a win over Andre Fili. And I kind of felt like that fight, it could have gone either way. I think Sadiq definitely won the second. And I think probably what the fight boiled down to is how the judges saw the first round. I personally, when I would have to go back and watch it and actually try to score it and judge it, I think I personally gave it to Andre Fili when I was watching it live, but I'd have to, like I said, I don't know. I thought he was mixing in the takedowns a little better. And I know he wasn't necessarily securing them, but it was just how well he was level changing and the timing on it. I think he had a better read on Sadiq than Sadiq had on him. But Sadiq was landing the more significant shots, so I don't know, man. That's a tough one to score. I thought it maybe closer to a draw than anything. Like I said, I'd have to go back and rewatch it. But yeah, I mean, a good night of fights, man. And Conor McGregor comes back in a big way to kick off the first pay-per-view event of the year. And like I said, plethora of options open to him. He can do whatever he wants pretty much now. So, yeah, guys, again, I know this was choppy. It's 11:40 p.m. for me now, so I'm going to get off here and get the fuck to bed. And, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Give it a thumbs up, thumbs down if you didn't like it. Leave comments. Let me guys know what you thought of the fight. Let me know in particular what you guys think Conor McGregor is going to do next. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. And, yeah, I think that's all I got. I'll roll one of these. I know we got a UFC fight coming up next weekend, so I'll roll out a breakdown for that. Hopefully on like Tuesday or Wednesday, Blades and Dos Santos. That's a pretty big fight in the heavyweight division. And a pretty good card as well. You got Michael Chiesa fighting RDA, Arnold Allen versus Nick Lentz. Arnold Allen's really fucking good. Espinoza versus Alex Perez, Hannah Cyphers, Angela Hill, Jamal Hill, and Darko Stajic. Am I pronouncing that right? Probably fucking not. But yeah, check us out. If you guys are watching this on YouTube or whatever, we're available on YouTube, iTunes. I just think I got this thing up on Spotify, Google Play Store. So yeah, that's it. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.